Thank you for being here. Spencer asked me to speak for about 25 minutes about what it means to be evergreen and talk a little bit about what we're doing. I'd like to first start with, I didn't know Spencer Burke until 2 years ago when I got this email. Want to learn more. Does that sound like Spencer Burke? So take a moment to read that. They're definitely evergreen. Ownership structure designed to assure we're here for generations. Adam Lieb was kind enough at Fidelity in Chicago to make the introduction. So I got this email, and I called Spencer immediately. This piqued my interest. And Spencer and I talked for a couple of hours, and I felt like I had been talking to somebody I knew for a very long time. He's just that kind of person. And I want to thank you, Spencer, because of Enterprise, being here today, the Stups, all these wonderful people in St. Louis you've introduced us to. So you are a jewel of this community. So my background, just to give you a little bit of perspective, is I was raised in Virginia. My family relocated to Santa Rosa when I was going into high school. And my first job was working at Hewlett-Packard. I had to take the job because my dad had told me, I'm not going to pay for your college education. So you're going to be in a position where you're probably not going to be able to borrow money or you may get some scholarship, not borrow money. So it's on you. So I wrote a letter to Hewlett-Packard when I was 16 years old asking for a job either in the cafeteria, gardening, or any kind of cleaning, because I figured there's nothing else they'd possibly offer me. And they said, hey, by the way, we have this thing called the SEED program. If you're interested, we'll hire you. It's for engineers, people interested in engineering. I'm like, I am very interested in engineering. So I spent the next 4 summers working at Hewlett-Packard. I'm dwelling on this just for a minute because it's so important. What I learned from the people on the manufacturing line at Hewlett-Packard is about Dave and Bill. And they talked with them about it with such reverence. And it was all stories of how they treated people. It wasn't about anything else but how they treated people. And there was legendary stories inside HP for many, many years about how those two treated people. Unfortunately, by the time I got there, that was starting to fade away. And they wanted me to know that this was not the HP of 50 years. This HP was something much more special. But it planted a very important seed in my mind. So I went to Berkeley, and I got a job at Bain & Company coming out of there. And I saw very quickly the opposite of an HP type of environment, because most of the clients that we work with were troubled manufacturing companies, insurance companies. And then most of my classmates went off to business school. I decided to start a company with an older gentleman making industrial CO2 lasers, 5,000 watt, high-powered lasers. And we ended up selling that a couple of years later. Went to Stanford Business School, and there's a local, I guess, son of this city, a gentleman named John Doerr, who reached out to me. Netscape had just gone public about 3 months earlier and said, I'd like you to come work with me at Kleiner Perkins. And I told John I didn't want to be a venture capitalist. I wasn't interested in doing that. So I spent the summer working at Netscape. John Doerr was on the board of Netscape, so John was keeping track of me and introduced me to Jim Barksdale and Mark Andreessen and all these kind of legends of Netscape, which made for a very interesting summer experience. But I was given a product line called the e-commerce server. It did not work very well. It was kind of a junky piece of software. Everybody else was focused on the web server. That gave me some very fundamental insights into the disruption that e-commerce was going to have on many, many industries. So I wrote a thesis around it to start a company called drugstore.com. John Doerr got wind of this and said, why don't you come to Kleiner Perkins? We will incubate drugstore.com, but then you will stop spending time on it. I'm going to have you switch to helping look at all of my deal flow because I'm getting 50 business plans a week. I have no way of processing these. I'm going to give them all to you with one objective. Do not miss the next eBay. I said, great, John. 50 a week. So I joined Kleiner Perkins, and John and I had a really productive partnership together, and I really enjoyed working for him. As you guys know who might know him in the audience, he's a bit quirky, but he's very bright, and he's kind of like a Boy Scout. He wants to do the right thing. So we worked on a number of projects together. Amazon had gone public the week before I joined the firm. I became very good friends with Jeff Bezos, and over the next 3 years, spent quite a bit of time in Amazon. We took this landscape mapping that I had put together for Kleiner Perkins to execute on e-commerce, and basically Jeff and I took it and divided it up, and he said, this is stuff I'm going to do, and this is stuff you can do. If you do anything that I plan on doing, then we shouldn't be in partnership anymore, and you shouldn't be a 12% shareholder of the company. So very clearly, Jeff knew he was going to do some things that, and some of the stuff made no sense to me, like hardware? Jeff, why would you want to do hardware? And he's like, I'm not going to talk about it. Please do not do something in the hardware industry. Which ended up being, most people don't know it, that was his 4th line after the bookstores. And he used it as a way to prove he could do anything. He goes, if I can sell hardware from a hardware store online. He goes, I can sell anything online. So that was a test case he was saving for himself to do. I ended up backing a company called Blue Nile in the jewelry space. I wrote the business plan for Auto Trader, and we partnered with Cox and actually created that property. Interesting enough, it was being developed inside Cox already. We just provided the catalyst they needed to have the courage to go ahead and do it. So we kind of just went along with them on that. And then my last major project was Google. So I spent about 6 months negotiating with Larry and Sergey to close an investment in a firm I didn't think we should invest in. So you can tell something about me as an investor. And so I spent being 3 years at Kleiner Perkins, and then I went and started a company called Good Technology. I had learned the playbook of how to get big fast, how to hire a lot of people, raise a lot of capital, and go for it. And so I was going to implement this plan myself. I raised $160 million in 12 months. I started the fundraising process at the time of the dot-com crash. So the partners at Kleiner Perkins said, this will be impossible for you to do it. So I was able to do it, partly because John was backing me, and partly because it was actually a very good idea. And the idea was basically to put wireless messaging into your pocket, which ended up being BlackBerry. And so we ended up coming into the market at the same time BlackBerry started pivoting into the market. I raised 160, they raised 800 million. And so the battle and the race was on. I was CEO and founder of that, chairman of it for a couple of years, and then I hired in a CEO, and it was probably the best thing for me to do is get out of the way, so I left the firm, stayed on the board. That was later sold to Motorola for $500 million. TPG was my next stop, and I got very lucky. Sometimes as investors, you just got to get lucky, and so $4 million, about 25% of a company called Success Factors. It had been passed on by 33 other venture capital firms. We took it public and sold to SAP for $3.6 billion. So it ended up being a nice outcome on that one. So I was able to help TBG with that fund. And then I decided to start my own firm because I saw a shift happening in the venture capital industry that I didn't like. And some of that's now coming out. You're seeing it and you're hearing about it. But I felt that, if you compare it to like Bill and Dave, I wasn't meeting anybody like that. The entrepreneurs coming into my office were all talking about money and how I'm going to raise that next round of financing and that next round of financing, and I'm going to get that big exit. And I'd try to revert back to, well, let's talk about culture. How are you thinking about your people? And people would just look at me, what? Product market fit, man. We got to get product market fit, and then we get the product market fit. We're going to raise more money, then we get more product market fit, and we'll go to distribution and raise more money. And there was just this kind of tension and anxiety, and I felt people were always trying to spin me, and so it was just a generally discomfort for me. And that led ultimately to the formation of the Tugboat Group, and I'll talk how that happened. Before I do that, I do want to say this, because I think this is very important. Why are we here? Why is Tugboat doing what it's doing? Why are these CEOs here, part of the Tugboat Institute? It's because we believe in the vital importance of human beings coming together to create and grow enduring private businesses that make a dent in the universe. It's just very important to understand that that's why we're here. So here's the three things I want to cover. What defines Evergreen, business myths, and how Tugboat is helping today. And the last part will be the briefs that I talk about. So it's now stepping back in history a little bit. 1998, I meet this woman, Jessica Heron. She's at Stanford Business School. She's about to give a presentation. I'm a coach for one of these business school presentation competitions. I liked her plan a lot. I said, look, why don't you come up to Kleiner Perkins, and let's talk about funding your business. So we did. Kleiner into being the lead investor. We raised $45 million. We hired a world-class CEO. We put Martha Stewart on the board of directors. It was a wedding registry company. And we're like, we're going to take this in public in less than 18 months. So we had the dot-com crash. Wasn't a great time to be trying to go public. As everybody knows, the company had, I think, $3 million in revenue. The bankers are telling us it's probably worth over $1 billion. That's how crazy it was back then and seems to be today. And the idea was, let's get this thing big, fast. It ended up being sold several times. She stayed with through those sales, trying to bring her vision to life, and was not able to do it. So she came to me in 2005, and I was straddling TPG and starting Tugboat Ventures. And she said, I liked you and your partners at Kleiner Perkins, but I don't like your model. I'm like, what do you mean? Oh, let me tell you about Tugboat Ventures. We're like the nice venture capital firm. And she goes, no, you're missing the whole point. She said, you have to sell me. To succeed, you have to sell me or take me public. You have to do an act against my company, which is probably not in the best interest of my company. So no, I don't want that model. And then she went on to say, my exit strategy is to be rolled out of my office on a gurney with an oxygen tank on my lap. And I kind of laughed, and I said to her so stupidly, I said, oh, you're going to build a lifestyle business. What? And she goes, I'm smarter, I've got a better business plan, I've got more experience, I'm going to affect positively the lives of millions of women, I'm going to go global, I'm going to do over $1 billion in revenue, I'm going to be very profitable. What's lifestyle about that? And I'm like, wow, that's pretty ambitious. And now you got another problem, because you said you're not going public, you're not selling, so you can't get any investors. But to build a business of that scale, you need $250 million. That's just the playbook. Again, this is like simple Dave. She said, I didn't tell you my time horizon. And she goes, my time horizon is to do this over the next 3 decades. You're thinking 4 or 5 years. You've got your venture hat on. Yes, if you want to build a global brand in 4 or 5 years, you probably need to raise $250 million. If you want to build a global brand over a 3-decade period, you can do incredible things from your own cash flow. Very wise woman. So a few of us pulled some money together. She got profitable on 1.6 million. That's all it took. And then she does about a little over 300 million in revenues today. So that seed had been planted, but as you can tell, I wasn't quite getting it. And so as I'm going through this kind of process of my early venture capital firm, she's off kind of building her business year after year. We re-intersected in 2012. And it was around the idea, do I raise another fund or not, which I didn't really have an appetite to do. So I went and spent a little time talking to her, and I wanted to know, is there other people like you? And I knew 2 firms. I'd heard by reputation of the SAS Institute, Jim Goodnight, because of being in the tech industry. He's $3 billion in revenue, never raised money, great firm. I mean, who is this guy? He's supposed to go public, but decided not to go public. And then See's Candy, which Berkshire Hathaway had purchased, but yet most people, at least I knew the legend of See's Candy because I was a Berkshire investor back in 2000. So I want to know, is there other iconoclasts and contrarians that are kind of building these forever private companies? And so what I did, is what I often do, is I just went to my network and started asking people, who do you know? And I basically asked this question: who do you admire? Who is ambitious to build a significant company, but for some reason they just will not raise venture capital or private equity? And this came slowly. It was 1 interview, it was 2 interviews, it was 3, because I'm in the heart of Silicon Valley, so this is a little tough in that market. But eventually met about 50 of those between late 2012 and 2013. Eventually, I talked to over 300, our team tried talked to over 500. And what I learned was there was a really interesting entrepreneur, a business leader out there, and I used this term to kind of describe it, and I like the term, was evergreen. This evergreen leader, they're running an evergreen business, and this was kind of the initial definition. The seasoned founder or CEO with a vision, creativity, resourcefulness, patience, and grit to build and scale a market-leading, impactful business at a steady pace that will stay private forever and share in the profits with their employees, with their communities. It was inspired by Jessica and Jim. So I decided to have a gathering in Sun Valley, Idaho, where I had recently moved. And so I invited about 40 of these people that I really liked and said, wouldn't it be fun to get together for, Glenn was actually here, Don, were you at the first one? Okay, Don was, Mac I don't think he's here, but there was a few that were at that first one. And the idea was, let's just get together and talk. What's it like to build a company on this kind of alternative path, this contrarian path? And I didn't know really what to expect. And I heard some people kind of use the word lone eagles. Kind of feel like a lone eagle out there. Nobody's really talking the way I'm talking. So I got together, spent a couple of days together. It was a fantastic sharing experience. This became the template for what would later become the Tugboat Institute Summit that we do every summer. So coming out of that first gathering, we wanted to put a framework around Evergreen to give it definition. And what we were after is that people were interpreting Evergreen to mean a lot of different things. And Evergreen is a private equity-backed company that's not going to be sold for 10 years instead of 4 years. Wow, that's Evergreen. That's a long time. So this was very helpful, and this kind of teased out what I learned in my interviews, what I learned over my career, what other people were telling me, and what I heard people saying on the stage at our very first gathering. So we call these the 7 Ps, the kind of Evergreen 7 Ps. And you can see them, they're on these flags on the side that Spencer was kind enough to encourage us to make. So I'll walk you through each of these very briefly, but this is the essence. The first 3 are really around the character of the ownership team and the leadership team, and the next 4 are really around the Evergreen strategy. So purpose is being driven by a compelling vision and mission. If you are building your business to generate wealth for yourself, that is the objective of the business. By our definition, you're not evergreen. You have to have a deeper purpose than that. You have to have a much deeper North Star than that, because fundamentally that's what's going to align your employees, yourself, your customers around something much more meaningful than just making money. And we want people to be wildly successful, so don't think we're against money. You know, if you generate a lot of wealth as a byproduct of your success, like a guy like Andy Taylor and the Taylor family, good for you. You've had tremendous good in the world. Perseverance, if you're going to be around for 100 years, and that's the kind of the frame we like to talk about, 100 years, you're going to go through a lot. You're going to go through a lot of recessions, a lot of difficult periods. Things are going to happen externally and internally to your company. You better be prepared to get through that. And on perseverance, too, simple little things like keep your debt low. You know, most evergreens have very low debt, and that's just a way of protecting themselves during the downturns. People first, this is a really important thing. This is what was kind of inspired by my experience at Hewlett-Packard, and the idea that if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers, they'll take care of your suppliers, your owners, their communities, and very importantly, their families, which is, at the end of the day, Much of this is that's what it's about. Being private and a commitment to staying private and understanding that gives you a tremendous competitive advantage. You can have planning horizons you would never see in venture capital and private equity in the public markets. You can do things strategically without revealing those strategies to any outside owners. You don't have to walk up Sand Hill Road and tell everybody what your 5-year strategy is. You don't have to talk to quarterly analysts who are going to rip you apart. You can do things that may even be non-obvious and contrarian because it's within your own decision right as owners. Profit is really, I like to think of just the economics of it, which is it is the measure of customer value delivered. Nothing to be shy about. I think in Silicon Valley we've kind of forgotten about the importance of profits. But the idea being is that if a customer will pay you more than it costs you to deliver that product, you're doing a damn good job. If that margin is big, you're doing a really good job. So be proud of that. And then use those profits to reinvest in the business, reward your team, share with your owners. You know, it's very important. And this is ultimately give you your sustainability and longevity too. Pace yourself. Don't grow too fast and outstrip your culture and your resources. Andy Taylor said this to me yesterday. I'm like, yeah, if you get growing too fast, Andy, it's really a problem because it starts outstripping your financial resources and then you'll be dependent on other capital sources. And he goes, that's not the issue. Yeah, you can deal with the finance. It's the people. It's the culture. He goes, don't ever let your culture get away from you. And that's what growth will do if you grow too fast. On the opposite end, if you grow too slow, you'll stultify the organization and your good people will leave. They need opportunities to grow and do new things. So growth is important as sustaining them. And then lastly is pragmatic innovation. The idea, again, if you're going to be around for 100 years, you're going to do things in 100 years that are very different than what you're doing today. So you need to wire into your DNA of your culture, from the lowest levels to the highest levels, an idea around continuous improvement. And for some people, it's Kaizen, just doing it better. For other people, it's going to be trying all new things, new products, new geographies, new ways of doing business. But you want to just have that be a natural part of the DNA of your organization. So that, kind of in summary, is the 7 Ps which we use to define Evergreen. So I want to hit a couple of business myths because we hear these from time to time when people are being critical of evergreens. And so I thought it'd be good to just talk about these. Jess Ravella, where's Jess right now? She's over here. So she's been out talking with the press. And she and I had a nice conversation a couple of weeks ago. And I said, like, what are you hearing? What are the people's objections? So she shared a few of them, and they're ones I've heard too. So you'll see some commonality on these. So the first is, you're not serious. You are not serious about business if you don't raise venture capital or private equity. And you're surely not serious about business if you're not striving to be public. So George Parker is a good friend of mine at the Stanford Business School. He's been there for 45 years teaching finance. He and I just saw each other on Monday, and we always just kind of butt heads on this. And I said, George, do you still believe being a public company is the highest calling of business? And he goes, Dave Whorton, being a public company is the highest calling of business. I'm like, you're wrong, George. If we can get on a panel someday, we'll fight this one out. But so I was looking for an opportunity to show this slide, so it's a little out of context, but so she was serious. She raised $1 billion. She was valued at $8 billion, and she was very serious about fraud. So I'd say, yeah, you can get some very serious people, but there are a lot of people who are actually doing it for the wrong reasons, and she was one of those people. What's ironic about this, do you guys notice the top right corner? How to build a company to last 100 years. She lasted 3 years after this article. That thing's gone, right? I'm sure she'll end up in jail by the time they're done with this. That was our launch post, written by Bo Burlingham. We were supposed to be on the front cover. Jessica Heron was supposed to be on the front cover until just a week or two before it went to print, and they flipped it at the last minute because the senior editorial team said, this is what people want to hear about, the next Steve Jobs, this woman who's growing like crazy, changing the world, raising money. Yeah, Jessica Heron's interesting, but she's just kind of building that thing and growing that thing. So anyway, I love this. Some people hate this. I love this. I want this forever. And this is another fact. These, in my belief, are all evergreen companies. I might not have them all right, but I believe they are. I would not want to compete with any of these companies. These are Andy Taylor Enterprise after the last 2 days, good luck. I mean, good luck. If I was at Avis, I'd just give up. I'd just roll the cars over, say, hire my employees. We're done. And you got Edward Jones here locally. You got MTM. You have from both of them this morning. I wouldn't want to compete with Mars or Fidelity. I wouldn't want to compete with the Koch brothers. And Wheeland, Greg's company here. So I've tried to show some smaller and some larger companies. These are great, great, serious competitors, great businesses. Oh, and this one I didn't kind of like great, so I won't forget. That tells you a lot too, doesn't it? if 84% of Fortune 500 CEOs believe it would be easier to manage my company if I were private, what they're saying is those companies are more competitive as private companies. That's what they're saying. I can't compete with them. This is a corollary in some ways, but you really have to have outside capital to scale. I hit this with Stella and Dot when we talked about it. Remember the prior slide? I don't know if any of those companies ever raised outside capital. If they did, it was probably just friends and family. But you can't build a meaningful company today with outside capital. And just to highlight the point that Jessica made to me that I didn't understand, I'm gonna give you a little case study. So EBIT on the left column, years on the right x-axis. Let's say the company today is doing $3 million of EBIT. And it's just doing its evergreen thing, growing 15% a year. By venture capitalist standards, you'd literally stop going to board meetings. You'd say, oh my gosh, what a catastrophe. I hope we get our money back. It's a mess. So we do is, so that's entrepreneur A, and then entrepreneur B is like, oh no, I'm gonna go raise money, I'm gonna sell a bunch of my company, I'm gonna get rich. So this person goes out and they do raise money, and they do a bunch of things to grow faster, because you can do things to force growth, and so they do this. And so they're at 15 million of EBIT, and then their private equity firm comes to them and says, you did a great job, let's sell this baby. And so you raise the capital, you grow rapidly, you're hitting 15, and then they find a deal to sell the company for 10 times. So $150 million, they turn to the founder and say, dude, you crushed it. You just made $50 million for yourself and your family. You never have to work again. And it's over. That company is gone. Bought by a strategic, completely stripped, say bye to your employees, hide from them at the grocery stores, because they're not gonna want to talk to you. But let's do what Jessica encouraged me to do. And let's just open up the time frame. So that's that. We raised the capital, we got our quick exit. Well, if you grow at 15% a year, year after year, and I'm not saying this is easy. It's probably easier on the early part of the curve, harder on the later part of the curve. This is what Andy Taylor's done. That becomes very significant. And this is the power of compounding. It's a very powerful thing. And so at that point, you're doing over 200 million in a year. 200 million of EBIT in a year. Go pay your taxes, you got another 100 million to do with. So you actually have 100 million of resources. You can go fund the arch if there need a shortfall on the budget. You can go share this profits with your employees. You can reinvest that in your business, you can distribute to your owners, you can do whatever they want to do with it. But you're punching that out every single year at an accelerating pace. So then it's 250, then it's 300, then it's enterprise rental car. Third myth, and this is really sad. 51% of millennials believe that capitalism is generally bad. And that's crazy, but that's what they believe. And there's probably some reasons why. But I can tell you, Evergreen can change that perception. And I'm gonna talk why I can. I believe, and I'm borrowing from a term that was used by a gentleman I'm gonna quote in just a moment, that Evergreens are in fact capitalism at its best. And there's a few reasons why. One is because employees deeply matter in Evergreen companies. Absolutely, they are incredibly important to the experience. The CEOs of Evergreen companies are very attuned to the experience their employees are having in their business, and they want that to be good for them and their families. So whether you're a 9-to-5er or you're ambitious to be a leader in that firm, you're valued. You're trained, you're empowered, you're promoted, you're compensated competitively. There's an opportunity in the future. You think about economic splits between capital and labor. Evergreen companies have freedom to do whatever they want as far as their splits between capital and labor. It's their business. They can give a much higher split to labor if they choose to, through compensation or benefits. Very importantly, they care about their communities. I mean, the one thing you can do to really hurt a community is sell your company so that that company is no longer present in that community. And we've all seen that happen. Unfortunately, it's happened a lot in the Midwest. And another thing you can do is be knee-jerk in reacting to things that happen in the economy, because you either borrowed too much debt or you got the wrong partners, so that something goes wrong and next thing you have to lay off a big chunk of your staff. That's terribly damaging to your communities. So generally, and Evergreens aren't perfect, you won't see that kind of behavior. You won't see that knee-jerk reaction to layoffs. You won't see them trying to make a quarter by a penny. One of the things we heard from Howard Behar, he was the number 2 guy at Starbucks, from 25 stores to 10,000 stores. He shared this at a summit a couple of years ago, one of our summits. He resigned for one reason, Starbucks, and he was the soul of Starbucks. He built the culture. He got in a fight at the board level with Howard Schultz about making the quarter by a penny. And Howard Schultz says, we are not gonna miss the quarter. And Howard Behar said, to make the quarter, this late in the quarter, I will have to do dramatic things to the employee base. It's got to be about headcount. I am going to have to take out a number of heads to do this. He goes, you will damage the culture of this firm for 5 years if we do this. And Schultz said, make the quarter. Howard said, "We will make the quarter, and I'm gone." And he left. And he was the man, the culture of Starbucks, just few people know. That will not happen in an Evergreen. And I did ask Howard, I said, "Howard, in the context of an Evergreen company, could you imagine laying off a chunk of your staff to make the quarter by a penny?" He just started laughing. He goes, "You would never do that." But that shows you the contrast between how an Evergreen business and ownership thinks and how you might get in a public company. And then lastly, it's very important. Evergreens are designed for longevity. That's the idea. We want these companies around a long time, want to be contributing for a long time. And they've got wonderful characteristics, a higher purpose that really gets your team and customers aligned and excited to be committed to you for the long time. As I talked about longer planning horizons, the ability to operate strategically in the privacy of your business. They protect their values and their growth through paced growth. They know how to innovate and improve, and they continue to strive for this because that's what's going to keep them around for 100 years. And the punchline being, if you look at Forbes' top 100 private companies, they average almost 100 years, which is awesome. Not all are evergreen, but most are. So I will wrap up with this little bit, and we'll get to the panels, the good stuff. So what are we doing at Tugboat Institute? Well, it's really about community and content. We believe by strengthening this community, we have what we need to support each other, whether it be connection, inspiration, new ideas, and best practices. And in fact, Andy said this to us a couple days ago. There are such a variety of people in this community. We have 130 CEOs, 35 states, 20 industries, four countries, 25% are multi-generational. All the secrets are right there within us. And so if we just have the ability to unlock that wisdom and that knowledge, we can really help each other out. And that's what we're trying to do in this community. And we do it through gatherings and forums and seminars and publications and other programs we're developing. And very importantly, and I learned this probably too late in my career, but hopefully everybody understands this. If you have deep, trusted relationships within a community of people, really good things can happen. Because it means people are going to share the issues they're dealing with, what's really going on in their lives. And that does give an opportunity for others to be helpful. And so that's a very important part of what we're trying to do. So you'll find, if you have a chance to talk to any of these CEOs in our community today, a tremendous level of humility. These are good people. They're not chest pounders. They don't need to stand on other people's shoulders. They don't need to show off. That's not what it's about. And it goes, frankly, right back up to purpose and people first and all those things they care about deeply. So Josh Barron said this at our last summit. I think it's really neat, too, because I was framing Evergreen in my mind as an alternative to private equity and venture capital, as an alternative to being public, but making no judgment about relative value or importance of these. And he kind of punched me with this one. He said, the tides are turning against scale as a singular determinant of competitive advantage and success. And that's true. For 100 years, who had the biggest factory, who had the most production, the most units of production, that was what mattered the most. And it doesn't mean it's gone away completely. That matters in some industries. But he said the pendulum is swinging towards areas where evergreen companies have an inherent edge. And that's what you're going to hear about in our panels today. So we have 3 panels. They're terrific panels. And we're going to tease out, why these evergreen companies are just so important and have such strong competitive advantage.